Welcome to the Veterans Impact Show, where our commitment is to help, hope, and healing of our veteran family and our nation. I'm Jim Blythe, a U.S. Navy veteran and a certified senior advisor. Join us as we continue the mission of leadership and commitment to our communities and our great country. Why, you never know where we're going to go or who you're going to meet. We invite you to join in, plug in, and share in what we do. This is your Veterans Impact Show.
Hey, welcome aboard today. We've got a really great program. I got to tell you, you're going to want to stick around for this. But in the meantime, I need to say a special welcome. Thank you, my co-host. He is a fabulous minister. I have enjoyed our Sunday services with the Heart Fellowship. Cedric White, you are an amazing marriage counselor as well.
I do my best, Jim. I've been told I do okay.
He's also a Navy veteran. He was a gunner's mate. So he fired the missiles. My planes dropped the bombs. Man, I got to tell you. So a special thank you also to DBTV, AUN. DBTV puts us on Saturdays at 11 o'clock, and we're on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. So join us. Spread the word. If you're a veteran, let everybody know you're part of the Veterans Impact Show. Also, I want to say a special thank you to Fairway Independent Mortgage, the company I work for. My MLS number is 311-548-2289 is a corporate one, equal opportunity lender, and I help people whenever I can. I also have a special thank you to Symbios Integrative Health for all they do, and to Healing Thine Heart Ministries.
Yes, sir.
So we've got some help to bring this together. Now, today, I happen to be sitting next to a Phantom jockey. Oh, better known as an F4 pilot. I met David at the Hope Center at the National Day of Prayer. And I said, what did you do in the military? He said, I flew Phantoms. And I was like, that was the neatest airplane that ever flew. Now, he didn't fly in Vietnam, but he's got some stories. So, David Holmes, you are the CFO for the First Liberty Institute. Tell us about, though, your military, what got you into the military, and how it prepared you to make a transition that you ultimately ended up as CFO of one of the greatest institutes in America, the American First Liberty Institute.
Well, thanks for having me, Jim. Cedric, I appreciate that. And especially thanks for having a fighter pilot, an Air Force fighter pilot on your show. I can trace my family's connection to this country's military all the way back to the Revolutionary War. So to some extent, I think it was preordained with my family. My dad was a colonel in the old Army Air Corps and then stayed in the Air Force after World War II. So I was preordained to really go into the military. And so being a Texan at the time, I first went into the Naval ROTC program, and I busted my knee playing athletics pretty badly, and the Navy flunked me on a flight physical. As I was saying earlier, the Air Force, I think we were losing guys over North Vietnam at the time more than the Navy. And so the Air Force guy looked out the window and looked the other way as he told me to bend my knees and touch the floor. And I did. I grimaced and did it. And he came back and said, that's good enough for me. So that's how I ended up in the Air Force. But I'm a proud Longhorn, went to UT ROTC,
All right.
UT Austin, and then went straight into pilot training. And then was selected, did well enough to be selected to go fly fighters for the Air Force. And it was singularly one of the most maturing experiences of my life. And it was demanding and whatnot. And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it, frankly. And that was the challenge. Could I do this? And the F-4 was a fabulous airplane, difficult to fly well. But the Lord was with me and got me out of more than a few scrapes. And I really had a great time flying.
We've talked about it. The Phantom was the real workhorse of Vietnam.
Right.
And they did a great job. That's a tremendous airplane. It's a beast.
Yes.
You said it was called the Rhino. It was a beast, but it did a great job. Now, you then transitioned out of the military. One of the big things you told me about was you have a real passion, a heart for people that are transitioning out of the military and going into the civilian world. And both Cedric and I have been through that.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that in the book you wrote.
Sure. My last, I flew for about 13 years actively, and then I was able to be selected for promotion a couple of times and went back to grad school. My last post was at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, in Japan. And as I went through 4 years there, I was promoted to full colonel, but my wife and I prayed a lot about it and decided that a door was opening in New York. Of all places, a Texan. Never thought I would live in New York City, but the opportunity to go to a world-class firm there and become an investment banker was one that I just felt I couldn't turn down. The Lord had given me this opportunity. So I left my post in the embassy, and then 2 weeks later, I'm in a pinstripe suit with a briefcase looking up at 60 Wall Street, which is where J.P. Morgan was, saying, Lord, what have I done? You know, and so I was able to transition to the investment banking world and private investment banking world, and then and stayed for about all told about 17 years doing that. The transition from the military into certainly Wall Street was one that it was difficult. It was a very high hurdle to get over, and once I had some success and I was promoted to managing director and was asked to go out to these campuses, to the better business schools to recruit. A publisher in New York heard about what I was doing and asked me to get my seminar notes together, and I ended up writing a book, and I devoted one chapter there to how to help the veteran get over that hurdle, you know, going from the military into a civilian life. It's a difficult hurdle, and it requires specific kinds of proactive measures, I think, for people. The veteran has so much to offer, and they're so misunderstood oftentimes by civilian employers. And so my heart is there to try to help veterans gain a foothold in a new life, a new career.
I hear all the time, gee, my company would love to get veterans. We love to work with veterans. They're self-starters. They show up on time. They know how to get the job done. Then other people will say, oh, you know, they got PTSD and they know how to use a gun and da-da-da-da-da. I don't really think that that's quite really the case and relevant when it comes to employment, because I think when a veteran gets into a job and gets his head into it, they do a great job.
Yeah, I was thinking there probably needs to be more education on both sides, right? From the civilian perspective and the how to accept and look for the skill set that veterans bring to the table, because there are a lot. And then re-entry training for veterans coming out of the military, right, in preparation for, we call it teaching them boots on, boots off. Right. How to live in this new world and not have the military, not lose the discipline, but not operate in the military mindset.
Right.
A lot of that information needs to happen a little bit more.
Now, you transitioned to First Liberty Institute.
Yes.
Tell us about First Liberty Institute.
Well, when I retired out of the private banking world, I had my own company for 4 or 5 years. And through a mutual friend, I met the then and still now CEO of First Liberty, Kelly Shackelford, and I went to the obligatory interview because my friend asked me to meet with Kelly, and during the course of that discussion, he uttered a phrase that really hit me, and he said, "Do you want to get back in the fight?" And yes, you bet I did. I really did. And so Kelly and the board asked me to come on. I'm not a lawyer, and First Liberty Institute is the nation's largest constitutional law firm focusing only on First Amendment religious liberty rights in the U.S. But I am responsible to try to make sure that the business side of things runs well. The trains run on time.
Right.
In other words, and so I've been there 12 years, and as both the chief operating officer and the chief financial officer. I've recently ceded the COO portion over to our chief legal officer, and I'm focusing my efforts principally now in trying to look over the horizon and trying to help ensure that First Liberty will be there to fight this good fight, 25, 30 years from now.
Right.
So it's been a real ride. The First Liberty, when I got there, we were quite small, but it's a good news, bad news. The bad news is the country has been tortured. It's tortured itself over this question of religious liberty. it's been really tough on our clients. But it's been good business for First Liberty, and unfortunately, we've had to take on these clients. In the last 10 years, we've had 9 cases that we've won from the Supreme Court. So it's been a very interesting period of time.
And we've been in the Hope Center, our organization, Healing Line Hearts, for about 8 years, and we've watched you guys grow and grow and grow, which is a wonderful thing, because that means the need is great, but you're there, and by you guys being successful, you're growing. So that's a very good thing. And it's great that they have a guy like you sort of watching the purse strings and a mindset for the future, right? Because the fight will never stop.
Right.
The fight will never stop. So.
Well, having a business expertise, and especially with the background you have in investment banking, you got to look at the whole picture. You look at the top down. And so I know from being a real estate developer, you got to really have a plan and be focused. So one of the things is some of the court cases and things that you guys do, and we have a short video, and I'd like for Jordan to play that short video, if you would, please, that kind of gives you an idea about what you guys do. So, Jordan, could you play that for us, please?
When it's warm and sunny, Bryan, Ohio looks like the perfect location for a Hallmark movie. But when winter hits hard, the streets turn cold, and the bitter wind makes the nights dangerous. A warm haven that's open 24/7 is Dad's Place Church, just half a block from the courthouse. If the name sounds like a sports bar, well,
we want people when they walk in to feel like, hey, this is something I'm already comfortable with. You know, many of the people we reach, just being honest, have spent more time in a bar than they have in a church.
Chris Savell is the pastor. Not that long ago, a church is the last place you would have found him.
So I was an in-your-faithist, which is some guy who's going to seek out Christians, right, and try and destroy their faith.
But God turned his life around. Out of gratitude, Chris and his wife felt called to reach people who were hurting the most.
I was alone for a long time after my husband died, and we lost our house because I didn't have it. I was living on $365 a month.
If you weren't able to stay here in the evenings, where would you go?
Probably in the car until we can find some place.
Dad's Place has saved my life. Without
Dad's
coming
Place
here,
saved my life. Absolutely.
I wouldn't be standing here today. I can attest to that for sure.
And that's why the church made the decision to keep the doors open all day and all night.
We're not a homeless shelter. We're a church. I mean, this is what we believe. Our beliefs are this is a core function of the church. And we certainly understand not every church is equipped to stay open 24 hours, right? But God has equipped us, and therefore he's called us.
And for months it went well, until on a Sunday morning, a police officer appeared and hit Chris with 18 criminal charges. His crime? Caring for people in need. First Liberty came alongside to represent him at his arraignment and to help him share his story with America.
This is what God did for me. I was spiritually homeless, and he provided a home for me.
Dad's Place feels called to be open 24 hours a day and to care for the least of these in their community. And that's exactly what it's doing, and that is fully protected by the U.S. Constitution.
Chris is not backing down.
This is truly how we worship God. Take care of the widow and the orphan. Take care of those who can't take care of themselves. Jesus says, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.
That tells you a lot about First Liberty right then and there. So you represent Christian organizations, you represent Jewish organizations, you represented some Muslim and other faiths as well. So it's all about constitutional law as it relates to religious freedom, correct?
That's correct.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of the other type cases that you guys have had?
Sure. As I said a minute ago, excuse me, we've had about, the last 10 years, we've had 9 cases in front of the Supreme Court. That alone is very rare. The court is petitioned by thousands of people to hear their stories every year. And to have 9 in 10 years is amazing. So something's going on here. Particularly of interest to the vets, I think, excuse me, is we have a case where in Bladensburg, Maryland, this cross, this beautiful cross, this probably sits 40, 50 feet in the air. It sits in turnabout, one of these traffic circles, and local cabbies actually used the cross as a point of reference as they're going from point A to D or wherever. And one day, someone from an atheist organization drives around there, sees it, files a petition, and what ensued was this horrendous set of cases to try to tear the cross down. And this cross was erected by the mothers of about 40 or 50 of these World War I veterans that died, about 21 of them, the last day of the war before the armistice was signed. And so to commemorate their sacrifice in 1925, the widows put this cross up. And so it went through federal district court, lost, went to the Fourth Circuit, lost, and we took it to the United States Supreme Court, and we won. In fact, that case now protects all of these public space monuments around the country. So all of these veterans memorials that are in open space sitting on public land are now protected because of the Bladensburg Cross case. Another one that you might find interesting is there was a postal worker that his name was Gerald Groff, and we took this Groff case because he really epitomized. Did you ever see the movie Chariots of Fire back in the 80s?
Right.
It had that Vangelis, that beautiful music and all that. The true story of Eric Liddell was a Scottish runner, but it was also very devout. Goes to China and becomes an ambassador and dies there. Becomes a minister and dies there. Well, Gerald Groff is a postal worker and was denied the previously approved. They allowed him to have an accommodation where he didn't have to work on Sundays, much like Eric Liddell. Then the Postal Service got this huge contract from Amazon to deliver goods on Sundays. Gerald, for not to do that, they fired him. So this case goes all the way to court. And we won unanimously 9-0. That now it can't be that just a small accommodation, like a little overtime, is good and sufficient reason for an employer to fire someone. It has to be a very substantial burden, financial burden for that to happen.
Well, that's really protection of liberty for all of us.
Right.
And religious freedom. And again, you don't represent just one group of people, Christians. You've represented Jews and all sorts. When we come back, we're going to take a break for just a second. When we come back, I know Cedric's got some questions about the anti-Semitism and what's kind of going on. And are you guys involved in some of that, trying to help out? So when we come back, we got more to talk about freedom for you. And this is freedom for you to join us, the Veterans Impact Show.
Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Heart's Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation.
David Holmes, Phantom Jockey, I call him, F-4 pilot. There wasn't a greater plane that could fly in Vietnam. I'm not even sure how they replaced it with some of the planes they've got now when it comes to performance. And I also am amazed because I've heard your story now about being an investment banker. I know how difficult that is because you've got to really understand things from top to bottom. And then you've joined the First Liberty Institute for Religious Freedom. And you are the CFO. Sometimes you were the CEO, you said.
The Chief Operating Officer.
Oh, okay. All right. So here's the thing. We're seeing a lot of anti-Semitism. I have my theories. I have my feelings. I know, Cedric, we've talked about this before. How can people do that?
Well, the question is, right, what from a legal perspective, what rights do you have? Why is it such a big issue now in the U.S.? And then from First Liberty's perspective, how are you involved in it? What are you guys doing in reference to some of the just what I'll call hate that's going on out there?
You know, I completely underestimated when I first joined First Liberty the amount of religious discrimination going on in the country. And though the predominant number is against Christians, it's not isolated to them.
Right.
We've seen prejudice against, as you said earlier, against Muslims, Muslim community, as well as the Jewish community.
Right.
In First Liberty right now, we are representing a number of Jewish congregations where municipalities are using some of the strangest arguments. In a way, it's not surprising, but using property arguments, utility bills, excess fees, things like that to try to run these congregations out of town.
Right.
And it's really, really abhorrent to see in this country, given what happened in 1941 to 45.
Right.
So right now we have a number of cases on the West Coast. We've had a very famous case up in New York, and it's widespread, and it seems to be accelerating, and I'm not quite sure why, but it's very disturbing.
Not to get too religious, but from a prophetic, from an end time perspective, it just seems that the snowball is growing, right? The level of, as you mentioned, level of prejudice against religious organizations, regardless as to what they are. Again, for the most we see, it is, and most that affect us are Christian organizations. But what I love about what you said, even in reference to the Dad's Place video that you showed, how when you guys win a case, it isn't just that particular case that it affects. It affects everybody over a spectrum of the community and the country that receive rights because of what First Liberty is doing.
Right.
And I think that's a wonderful thing, because it's not just a one-off, right? We all win. Our freedoms are all protected from every aspect.
Right.
So I think that's a wonderful thing. Let me ask you, in reference to you, in reference to Kelly, because your changes, I mean, from the military to investment banking to now First Liberty, that's a broad spectrum. How has that, when you look back over it, did you ever think that God would take you on this type of journey?
No, I didn't. I wanted to fly fighters. That's really what I wanted to do. And I thought I would stay in. And as I said, I was blessed. I was promoted to full colonel. Thought I would stay on,
right,
and continue. But something was working inside of me that gave me this opportunity to get into the private investment bank at Morgan, and that was a fabulous career. And it was it had its own challenges. It said it was difficult, very rewarding, great companies. But when I got out of that and had my own company for a while, I realized that there was a void in my life. I was missing something. The something that I was missing was an ability to try to help other people in a more direct way.
Right.
And that's what First Liberty does. Our value proposition actually is to try to deliver hope.
Right.
And so it's appropriate that we're both at the Hope Center,
right?
But to deliver hope to people who are being persecuted in this country. And it's hard to see. You love the country as much as we all do.
Yes.
To see the country have to go through this kind of tortured period in our history. It's a rewarding experience to work at First Liberty and have a chance to overturn bad precedent in some cases.
Right.
And continue on.
Well, a lot of times we forget that peace sometimes takes a fight, right? The Bible even says, blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers, right? So we can't just sit back and be quiet. We actually have to go out and sometimes take on the forces of evil, take on the forces of hate and prejudice in order to keep the freedoms that we've been given.
That's right. That's right. I was relaying earlier that I had a chance when I was in West Germany at the time, and I came in right as Vietnam ended. And being a young buck flying BF-4 and the fighters, I kind of struggled with that. I felt like I'd missed out. The couple of classes ahead of me went over,
Right.
and so instead I find myself in West Germany, and the Cold War was not so cold. I know in one period of time we lost about 10 guys. Flying fighters in bad weather in the mountains, deployed. My last year in Western Europe, I was deployed about 310 days of that last year to some place where the bad guys were doing things they shouldn't be doing. And we had to be in their face, and whatever the conditions were. And so we lost a lot of people during that time. And so I was missing that sense of of mission orientation, and every person at First Liberty, I think, they certainly could make more money elsewhere.
Right.
But these folks are really dedicated, and they're mission focused to try to restore religious liberty rights to every person in this country.
So it's just a different fight now.
It's a different fight.
Yeah, that's
And there's so much that needs to be fought over to maintain not only religious liberty, but freedom in this nation. And we're seeing a lot of things that have gone on for the last few years that are making my tummy turn. So when we come back, though, let's talk more about some of the other things that the First Liberty Institute does to help in our community. So this is Jim Blythe and my co-host Cedric White, joining us with David Holmes. Not Sherlock, but David, right? But you do have the look, David, I must tell you. And of course, if you were a fighter jock, I also know you've got the tenacity and the purpose, because you can't do that. So we're going to be right back after these words.
Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Hearts Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation.
This is an amazing conversation about religious freedom and liberty with David Holmes. And Cedric White and I are Cedric knows David from the Hope Center where you office. I met David at the National Day of Prayer. Amazing, amazing man. Let's talk about some of the other things that First Liberty Institute does, one of which is the Journal of Religious Culture and Democracy. Tell me about that, please.
Sure. We are called First Liberty Institute.
Okay.
And so, yes, we're a law firm, and we are have an educational component to our enterprise. But we felt that we needed to have a more formal academic orientation also. And so a few years ago, we started the Center for Religion, Culture, and Democracy, CRCD. And it's a hub and spoke kind of operation where we have a couple of really brilliant scholars that are on the staff at First Liberty with too many PhDs that I can remember, but they're really smart guys. And then they have out in the spoke, they have a number of affiliated scholars in various disciplines. And so the CRCD looks at the intersection between some forces that are frankly, in some cases, in collision between our First Amendment religious rights, our religious liberty rights and freedom, with some social issues. Okay. And so these scholars, they publish this journal out for academic purposes. It's getting some real traction. We have, being a Wall Streeter, I was interested in indexes. Right. Everyone quotes, how's the market doing? And they look and see the Dow Jones Industrial Index
right,
or the Standard & Poor's 500 Index. It's been very volatile recently, right? So everybody's interested in it. So I said, isn't there some way we can index and get a handle on the degree of religious persecution or intolerance in this country? So CRCD took this on several years ago and applied a lot of academic rigor to it. And they've published now three kinds of, or I think they're coming out with their fourth index, and it's a state's listing of how the states are doing relative to the statutes that are on the state's own books, and some federal law about how well the states are complying with these, and do they have them on the books or not. And so this CRCD is really a way of looking at the religious liberty problem from a scholarly viewpoint, not just in the courtroom. It also sponsors a number of fellowships. We have one actually started today. I think we had 17 of our Shaftesbury fellows that showed up today, as well as some interns that will spend the summer under the scholarship tutelage of these CRCD scholars that we have and learn more about this question. And then they'll go on, most of them on to PhD programs, or many of them on to law school, or some of them are in law school right now. So it's an educational effort we're really quite proud of.
Well, that's really something, man. You're bringing the next generation along. Was that part of this First Liberty Fellowship? Is that what you were talking about there?
Yes, the First Liberty Fellowship is part of this CRCD initiative. Kelly felt that we needed an initiative in the area of younger people that needed to learn about the world in which they were going to have to exist. And so we try to get these young people when they're in their formative years And frankly, some of the college turbulence that's been going on is symptomatic of what's going on in the classroom on college campuses. So to counter that, we felt like we needed to give these people the tools they need from an academic standpoint, the history of the old church, for instance, or the philosophy of natural rights, and some of the philosophers that helped shape the thinking of our founders.
Right.
And so this fellowship is one area that we're attempting to do that. And they'll be here all summer.
Wow, now that's a good deal. Now I see another one, the religious liberty in the states. Is that, again, a part of this that you guys are doing?
Yes. That's the index I was describing earlier, where we rank order all 50 states, depending on how they're doing relative from a statutes basis.
Is that available can anybody get that information?
Go to our website. Our website is www.firstliberty.org.
Right.
FIRSTLiberty.org. You can go there, and the path will take you to the CRCD landing page where you can get a copy of this.
Gotcha. All right. Interesting. I mean, that's I first of all didn't know anything like that existed, but that definitely would be something of interest, and for those who just want to be informed of what's going on, because a lot of things you guys do, most Joe public aren't aware of it. I'm there in the same building with you, and I wasn't even aware of the index. So that's wonderful. Yeah. That's wonderful.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's just stop for half a second, because you were in Germany. You went down, I believe you said, to Dachau or to one of the... Right. Where did Adolf Hitler start? He started, in my opinion, with the anti-Semitism and the hatred of the Jews. He basically took everybody's view away from, and they demonized Jewish people. Mm-hmm. Whenever you demonize a group of people, whenever you discriminate against a group of people, look what happened in Germany. Right. Look what happened in the Soviet Union when they took over, when the Bolsheviks took over. So when you take away religious freedom to a nation or to a people, you start the rapid downhill slide into totalitarianism, and using that demonization of people as a vehicle with which to do that.
Right. Well, I think the First Amendment to our Constitution is the Free Speech Amendment and the Freedom of Religion Amendment. Mm-hmm. It's not the 5th or the 10th or the 20th. Right. It's the first. And that's for a reason. Mm-hmm. And we feel that from the first, the rest of them fall. So if the First Amendment falls, it won't be long before the rest of them begin to fall as well. So that's why it's important that we retain our free speech rights, as well as our protections against the establishment of a government-mandated religion. But you're also allowed to practice your religion. Right. You don't have to be thrown into a basement somewhere. That's the only place that you can pray. That cannot stand. Right. The founders did not believe in that.
Okay. So one of the things that you guys are doing is to maintain freedom for all of us, regardless of our beliefs or background. So if an atheist is being discriminated against, you guys say, oh, wait a minute, this dog don't hunt.
Well, we are strictly on religious liberty. It's interesting. We, especially during COVID, we were inundated with a number of requests concerning the vaccination. But we are inundated by requests for Second Amendment, gun rights issues, things like that all the time. But we are strictly about religious liberty, and that's what we focus on. Mm-hmm. Nothing else.
We have the time. Jordan, could you go ahead and play that second? Ladensburg, please.
I feel like this is a really important day. Almost 100 years ago, we had mothers who lost their sons in World War I, as well as the American Legion, decide to put up a memorial for those who had given the ultimate sacrifice. It's the Peace Cross. And it was put up to honor the 49 young men from Prince George's County who gave their lives for our country. And the idea that we're talking today about whether we're going to tear down this memorial is really a disgrace. And I really feel like we've got a choice of two Americas that are being presented in front of us right now. An America where we begin not only tearing down this memorial, but that would just be the beginning of the religious cleansing that would start, as memorials and monuments across the country would be under attack if they had religious imagery. But on the other hand, we could have an America, which I think is where we're going, where the court cleans up the law in this area, makes clear that these attacks on veterans memorials and religious monuments around the country are not what our laws propose or support or our founders ever intended. And instead, we can remember that we're a country that has memorials and monuments all across our country that are secular, that have religious elements, and that's okay because we're a diverse people. So let me call up Kevin Bartlett right now with the American Legion, who's the judge advocate. And Kevin, oh, there you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. I stand here in a very humble position because these are the heroes of our country. All of these men and women wearing their hats, you should be thankful for. Everyone behind me and in front of me wearing this beautiful cap signed a piece of paper. They weren't asked what religion they were, but they willingly went off to defend our nation, just like the 49 heroes that are on that memorial. On Legion.org, we have identified 2,376 different memorials throughout this country. After our opposing people tear down this other one, do they want to go after those? Where does this stop? I am saddened, just like I know everyone behind me is saddened to be here today. Those Gold Star mothers did what they had to do, and they erected a memorial to their son. It can't go away. The American Legion was founded to preserve the memories and incidents of our great wars, and that's why we're here today, to keep remembering those heroes. Thank you. Mary? We should have Mary talk.
Mary is one of the descendants of somebody that's on the actual memorial. And why don't you say a few words, Mary? Mary LeQuay.
Yes. My uncle, Thomas Notley Fenwick.
You gotta step a little closer, man.
There you go.
My uncle was Thomas Notley Fenwick. He was a soldier in the First World War. He died in France. And my grandmother, Pearl Fenwick, is the one who helped get that memorial put up. I am saddened to think that that memorial would be taken away. Every time I pass that memorial, I think of my uncle. His name is on it, and I feel like that is a memorial to him. I know it is to the others also. Thank you.
Well, I tell you, I thank God for the American Legion. Am I allowed to say that? I think I'm allowed to say that.
Yes, absolutely.
But we want to have any questions. If you have a question that you'd like to ask about anything, we're happy to answer a couple of questions. If
I've heard a lot of different attorneys saying different things about how they think it went in there. The other side just said it's not very optimistic.
Well, I mean, you never know what the court's going to do until they issue their opinion. But I think it was very encouraging to hear that everybody recognizes that the Lemon test and the current approach that's being used is in hopeless disarray. It's creating confusion throughout the courts, and it's causing all these attacks on veterans memorials and monuments across the country. And I think the court really clearly wants to change that. And so we'll wait and see what they do. But we were very encouraged by the way things went today and are really hopeful, but we probably won't know until late June the decision from the court. Anything else? If not, thank you, and thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you guys. Good job.
That was outstanding, and that is very explicit about what you guys do. And it's like the culture, what is it, cancel culture? Is that what they call it? They're wanting to cancel out our history. Why?
Nullify
Nullify.
history. Yeah. So we can change it. We can make the truth what we want it to be, as opposed to what John 8:32 says: "The truth shall make you free."
Yeah.
Right. But it has to be the truth. It's not people come into our office and they talk about, well, this is my truth. Well, is it the truth? That's the question.
Yeah.
Is it the truth? And a lot of times it's like, let's just change what really happened. Let's just change what really, so we can feel better. Well, let's go with what the truth is, and let's stand on truth. Truth is powerful.
You mentioned that you were in Germany and you went to one of the Holocaust camps,
Right.
and they haven't done away with those camps. And they've maintained those camps, I think, to be able to say, we don't ever want this to happen again. And look what happened.
Right.
And I think we've got a Holocaust memorial here in Dallas at the Arboretum that I've been to. We need to remember what went wrong. We don't need to cancel that.
Right.
And we don't need to tie up everything in the court. If you don't like something, so what?
I turn it off on TV. If I don't like it, I turn it off.
Turn it off. Turn it off on your cell phone.
Yeah.
If you don't like something, don't go to that store.
Yeah.
You know, there was a court case that I remember, and I think you guys handled it, come to think of it, where a baker did not want to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. And they ended up spending a bloody fortune defending themselves in court. And they ultimately won. And it really wasn't about anti-gay, anti-this or anti-that. Hey, you want a cake? Go get one somewhere else.
Exactly.
Why punish me for something you want? So I think we need to really understand. And you want to go to the FirstLibertyInstitute.org, is that correct?
FirstLiberty.org. FirstLiberty.org.
And I think it's really important to find out more about these. If you're a young student, a law student, you want to know more about constitutional law, this is a place to start with what Liberty Institute is doing. This is an opportunity to really maintain our not only religious liberty, but our liberty. Because if you take it one step at a time, and if you take away somebody's religious liberty, David, what's going to happen? It's just going to keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. And we're all going to lose our liberty.
Right.
And that's something that we don't want to do.
Right.
All right, we're going to be, okay, so we're going to be coming back and doing some commercials in just a second. I want to tell you, thank you so much for First Liberty Institute for all they do. Diane and I contribute. I really want to come back and ask David to talk about legacy, what you're talking about there, and how somebody can donate, how somebody can participate, how can somebody support First Liberty Institute, which is supporting our freedoms. So we'll be right back after these words from all of our sponsors. Again, a special thank you to DBTV and AUN for all they do for us, for Fairway Independent Mortgage, for Symbios, for Healing Thine Heart's Ministry. You need marriage counseling? That's the best in the nation. So we'll be right back after these words, and thank you again. And as far as David and First Liberty goes, thank you for coming on board today. We're going to finish this up in just a second. Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Heart's Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation. Well, this has been quite a conversation about religious liberty and about liberty, period, as far as I'm concerned.
I think those who tune in have learned a lot, and there's just so much that we don't know that goes on, I guess, under the cover or unseen about the fight that has to happen in order for us to keep our religious liberties.
Well, just because people say, gee, I don't like war, I'm anti-war, you're not going to tear down the Vietnam Wall. You're not going to tear down the World War II Memorial or the Korean or Vietnam. You're not going to do that because it reminds us of what went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to tear down the Holocaust Museum. we want to be reminded so it doesn't go wrong again. We want to be reminded about slavery. What a horrible thing that was. We don't want it to happen again.
Exactly.
That's right. You know, we won that case, that Bladensburg Memorial case, 7-2.
Really?
Yep. So I would encourage people to go up to Bladensburg. It's just a little bit north of Washington, D.C., and drive around the circle. It's a beautiful monument.
Wow, that's neat. And I know there's a lot more out there that's probably coming on right now that people are being hammered by. Small businesses being hammered. And again, the anti-Semitic that we're seeing on the college campuses, that just breaks my heart. I'm saying, how could you do that? How could you live in a country where the home of the free and the brave, and yet you're doing that to people? If you don't believe in our Constitution, you don't believe in that, then why don't you go live somewhere else? Go try something else. And I got to tell you, you've been to foreign countries.
Been to lots.
You've been to a bunch of foreign countries. So have I. Would I want to go live in one of those environments?
I say it all the time, Jim. We're not perfect, but I don't know of any other place that I'd want to live than right here in the good old US of A. Right. When I went into the Navy, I really didn't understand patriotism. I went into the Navy because I needed a trade and I needed somebody to pay me. That was my reason. As a matter of fact, I tried to go into the Air Force, but they were at lunch. And so I literally went to the Air Force recruiter. They were at lunch. I walked next door and went into the Navy, and that's all she wrote. But once I was there and once I started to travel overseas and I saw some of the things and the way people were living, and even now in ministry, and I go on missions trips, I realized, and I've had very, very in-depth conversations with people who've never left the country, that they speak very, very negatively about what goes on here. I say, but we're not perfect, but you've never gone to see what real imperfection looks like.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm very patriotic. I love this country, and much like you, I was in corporate America for 26 years, but my heart just wasn't there. My heart was to help people, and that's when my wife and I decided to go into ministry to help couples and families to be stronger. So I understand that. I understand that drive, that burden. Yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I understand the same thing because I've been doing 20 years in corporate America, providing service to the elderly to try and help them. And it's more than just providing money or a mortgage. It's providing training. It's providing getting on track, being able to take care. And then what I've learned in the last 10 years is broadcasting for veterans. How much is needed? Like you talking about transition.
Right.
How much we need to do to change that mindset. How much we need to do to be able to equip people to be successful. It's almost like there's an undercurrent of people who are unsuccessful that want everybody else to be unsuccessful.
Well, misery loves company, right? And I think a lot of it also is the fact that just what's unknown, the ignorance of the services that are out there. That's why we talk about, right? How do we promote this more, right? Help, hope, and healing. That's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
We're trying to provide that to people. But a lot of people, you don't know what you don't know. And so we stay quite often. People will seclude themselves. They'll become more recluse, right? And they sit in a basement somewhere and then feel like they're just hopeless, not realizing that just, who knows, just, one phone call can change their life. One phone call can change their life. So we're just trying to get the word out there. We're trying to get the word out, let you know that First Liberty is here to help you. If you're having religious situations, somebody's trying to squelch your religious rights, we got somebody we want you to talk to. First Liberty.
And how do they go there? It's firstlibertyinstitute.org?
Firstliberty.org.
Liberty.
Firstliberty.org.
There you go. Thank you very much.
That's our website.
And so you got to stand up. Somebody's got to stand up. Because if we don't, we will end up just like Germany did, just like Russia has, just like you and I have seen in other countries, that sort of abuse.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if you lived in a certain Middle Eastern country and you pulled out your Bible you might lose your
I
head.
was gonna say not for long.
Now, and right now, do you know where Diane was telling me the number one country in the world for Christian deaths is where? Nigeria.
Yeah.
Nigeria.
90% of Christian persecution in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Deaths. Yeah.
And so that's where this keeps going. Once you let it start, it becomes lawless. It becomes completely unruly. And then once they start, they're going to go down that road and taking people's lives.
So, David,
we don't want that.
We want to say thank you for what you guys do.
You bet.
You guys on the front line of allowing us to be able to pray out loud and to read our Bibles out loud and to go to church out loud, to display our beliefs. Thank you guys for what you do.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
Yes.
David, we always close with a prayer. So it's my turn. So I'd like to, Lord God of the universe, universal God of our hearts, we thank you for this wonderful opportunity to have this program and to get the word out about religious freedom, religious liberty. And we thank you for what this company does and what they do to help all of us. Thank you, dear God, for putting a hedge of protection around our active duty military. Put a hedge of protection around our veterans who are bringing forth their lessons in leadership and organization to make this country great. Dear God, we thank you and we ask you in Jesus' name to have a complete revival in this nation so that everybody understands one thing, that this is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Amen.
We'll see you next week.